Our research project will centre around the question, how do changing perspectives on Colston's memorialisation in Bristol reflect the city's attitudes to its history of slavery? As a group, we decided to focus on the forced labour block of the course, as we found this most engaging, especially in regards to the toppling of Colston's statue in the Black Lives Matter protests. From this, we went down rabbit holes of different sources, leading us to question how the city's past has been left largely untouched, and the ways in which this is reflected upon the city and its residents. Thus, as a group, we wanted to unpick these colonial legacies in Bristol, and the ways in which they are contemporarily constructed.
To begin our rabbit hole, we were curious to see how Colston was perceived when he was still alive and started by focusing on his family. Using data from the Society of Merchant Venturers and from Colston's biography in the History of Parliament archives, we see that Colston was born into one of the most prominent merchant families in Bristol. His father, William Colston, was High Sheriff of Bristol in 1643, and after the restoration of the Crown in 1660, Colston's father resumed civil office in Bristol, entrusting his son to look after interests overseas. In order to further research how the Colston family was perceived at the time, it would be interesting to look at Bristol's council archives when Colston was in office, as well as asking local historians about the popularity of merchants at the time. In 1673, Colston joined the Mercers Company trading in cloth, oil, wine and fruit with Spain, Portugal, Italy and North Africa. However, due to lack of data, details are vague. Looking at Colston's biography, it can be determined that in 1680, Colston joined London's Royal Africa Company. As he was already a well-respected and influential figure, he was heavily involved in the administration of the company over an 11-year period and was its deputy governor for 2. The years in which Colston worked for the Royal African Company were his most lucrative. It is likely that he played an active decision-making role in relation to the transportation of 80,000 slaves, with an estimated 20% of them dying on passage across the Atlantic. In 1692, Colston cut ties with the Royal African Society, and with no heirs he started putting much of his vast wealth into charitable causes focusing on his home city of Bristol. Some of the examples of his charity work include founding almshouses in Bristol, founding Colston's Hospital as a boarding school for 100 boys, and funding other schools and churches. Using data from the Dolphin Society, it is clear that at the time his charity was nationally recognised. A year after his death in 1721, his portrait was published in London with a description describing him as the brightest example of Christian liberty that this age has produced, both from the extensiveness of his charities and for the prudent regulation of them. Thus, suggesting at the time he was revered for his philanthropic work with no one questioning where his money came from. I will now hand over to Jodie, who will be talking about how Colston's memorialisation reflects Bristol's attitudes towards forced labour.
Historically, memorialisation has been a tool that's aided the reconstruction of collective memories, with Morgan arguing that these construct rhetorical narratives of power through selective interpretations of municipal memory. This power to redefine histories lies with the social elite, of which Colston was at the top. His prominence within Bristol's place names represent his self-constructed legacy through philanthropy, leading to a confiscation of collective memory and a general acceptance of his generous legacy. Morgan argues that the Society of Merchant Venturers have contrived to forget almost as much as they demand we remember regarding such legacies, thus rewriting history by implanting their idealised memory onto the landscape. These reconstructive narratives through commemorations create further questions surrounding tributes to Colston. Despite recent criticism of Colston's remaining presence, Bristol's ties to slavery went largely unmentioned until the 1990s. This is described by Chivalon as amnesia, with this lack of acknowledgement leading to the current controversy surrounding these legacies. Black Lives Matter protests occurred as a consequence, encouraging questions of whether officials were listening to the wishes of residents. In our project, surveys would allow us to understand opposing views on this event across demographic divides. However, a 2008 survey displayed that 67% of residents disagreed with the city issuing an apology for its tie to slavery, indicating a possible failure of Bristol to ensure that its residents are fully aware of the true extent of its past, as exhibited within our lines of inquiry. Whilst Bristol began to recognise its history in 1997 with the formation of the Slave Trade Action Group, the manner in which Colston's legacy still presides may indicate insufficient change. Furthermore, Colston is a physical manifestation of Bristol's triangular trade, and his commemoration is an indication of colonial legacies still at work in Bristol. These include place names, statues and Colston Day, amongst other examples. We are specifically interested in Colston's statue, located on Colston Avenue in Bristol, which was toppled during the 2020 Black Lives Matter protests and arguably represents the effectiveness of his self-designed legacies. Prior to the toppling, debate had surrounded the statue for years, revolving around both its existence and the wording of the plaque. Those who still supported Colston's philanthropic legacy arguably sanitised the wording, leading to public outcry. Historian and member of the Society of Merchant Venturers, Francis Greenacre, replaced trafficked with transported, amongst other subtle changes that minimise Colston's role in this trade, with these being considered unacceptable by Mayor Marvin Rees. Within our focus on Colston's statue, an interesting angle to gather data from would be within the 2019 debate over the rewording of the plaque, as this constituted a key reflection of the way that Bristol's past has been viewed contemporarily. Francis Greenacre and Marvin Rees were both heavily involved in this process, and anecdotal insight from them in the form of an interview would constitute a significant part of our project. From our initial research, translating our lines of inquiry into interview questions would allow us to receive opinions from both sides of the debate.
As our research involves changing perspectives, we must also look at the current views held by Bristolians on Edward Colston's memorialisation to assess how opinions have changed. As we are no longer constrained by many of the issues which historical research involves, citing Bacon 1997, we are able to employ other information gathering techniques to discover potential answers to our lines of inquiry. We would split this across active field research and passive data collection. A questionnaire would form part of our active field research, where we would discover how current residents feel regarding Colston's memorialisation using a representative sample of Bristolians. By posing questions in accordance with our lines of inquiry, we can collect data which allows us to answer our question of how, or even if, the city's attitudes to its prior involvement in the slave trade have changed. Our questionnaire would naturally have to be asked to a representative sample base within Bristol. In order to achieve this, census data or data-shined maps could be used to cross-reference demographic factors with place. The questionnaires could be posed using a number of websites, for example SurveyMonkey, to allow greater participation, especially during COVID. With the data collected, it would aid us in answering our research question, as we can compare if or how perspectives have changed regarding Colston's memorialisation. Our data can then be cross-referenced with participant demographic factors, as well as data-shined maps to allow for greater analysation based on age, income, location and education level. We are also able to obtain answers to our research questions using data collection. Through the use of news articles, journals and social media, we are able to extract opinions on how Colston has been memorialised. In particular, social media has been key in orchestrating the 2020 BLM protest, which saw the statue of Colston removed by protesters. Clearly we can analyse here that there is direct aggression against the positive memorialisation of Colston, led by a demographically younger population. However, other data sources, such as the poll done by Bristol Live, saw that 20% of people were against the statue being pulled down altogether. Drawing from different sources, we can see that there is still some contention around the memorialisation of Colston, which are research targets.
To further investigate the lines of inquiry we have identified so far, it will be useful to expand our research methodologies so that we can approach our topic in new ways. This will provide novel perspectives and insights, allowing us to further develop our inquiries. One particularly useful resource is DataShine. This website consists of an online map that reveals certain demographic trends across the space of the UK. We can utilise this to gather demographic data on Bristol. We can discover local trends in employment, health disparities, housing equality, ethnic or religious diversity, upon many other useful sets of data. Using this data, we can investigate whether certain demographic trends within Bristol are related to attitudes or opinions surrounding Bristol's colonial history and also how Colston is perceived. Furthermore, we can compare this data with the results we gathered through our previously mentioned questionnaire. Doing this may reveal correlations between the responses we receive and the trends we observe on DataShine. Moving on from DataShine, there are several other suitable resources we can employ to gather data towards answering our research inquiries. The Bristol Slave Trade Trail stands out as being particularly interesting. It highlights several of Bristol's most significant landmarks regarding the modern-day legacies of its past and slavery. Ideally, we would be able to visit Bristol and follow the trail in order to get a first-hand experience of these landmarks, providing valuable insights to help answer our inquiries. Moreover, there are specific landmarks of interest along this trail, namely Colston Hall, the statue of Colston, and Colston Avenue. This trail therefore ties intimately with our chosen topics and so can help us uncover more data towards answering our inquiries. Furthermore, we can also consider the works of academics. Their contributions within journal and news articles can provide us with yet further information surrounding the memorialisations of Colston and slavery in Bristol. I have noted multiple key academics involved in understanding Bristol and slavery, like historian David Olusoga and Bristol University's own Mage Dresser, each having done work that focuses on topics closely related to our own. Studying their work will therefore enable us to dig deeper into our rabbit holes and discover more about Colston and slavery.
From our rabbit holes, we have found that initially Colston had a very positive impact on the people of Bristol, with very few sources highlighting any contemporary criticism or ethical concerns. Our research would therefore focus on how views on his memorialisation have shifted within Bristol's social consciousness, allowing for further insight into the feelings of current residents. While studying this, our group thoroughly engaged with the immediacy of the issue, with protests led by the Black Lives Matter and other organisations taking place throughout 2020 and 2021.